we look at sports a little bit different in this country. Like, and I know the English Premier League, I was just over
Mm-hmm.
there, like
Mm-hmm.
it's huge, but it doesn't stop. It's
Right.
365. And
Right.
so
Right.
these young guys are just, so when you compare it, especially to a substance use lens, the joke I always make is like, because I'm in recovery from both gambling and
Mm-hmm.
drugs and alcohol,
Mm-hmm.
it's like I never threw a bottle of vodka in the backyard with my dad. So when we're starting to practice with these individuals, you talk to a drug addict or an alcoholic, they didn't start really romanticizing the relationship with drugs and alcohol to maybe like middle school, late middle school,
Mm-hmm.
early high school,
Mm-hmm.
where
Mm-hmm.
like you have that really early attack.
Yeah.
I bet if I asked you what's your earliest memory of soccer, you could be like 5 or 6. It's certainly before ever you got introduced to that red Solo cup,
Welcome to the Four Peaks Parents Podcast with your host, Thomas Miller. I'm honored to have with me today Brian Dolan. Brian Dolan is an expert in helping young adults avoid the trappings and, oh my God, slippery slope associated with gambling. We're going to talk all about how to help young people navigate basically gambling, right? And a very important topic that I don't think gets enough press. Brian is an expert in this space, has been in this industry for a decade prior to focusing specifically on helping young adults basically avoid, as well as obviously move out of and move toward recovery vis-a-vis their gambling. He has tons of experience helping young adults in collegiate programs throughout the U.S., right? You were the head of the Fairfield and the Sacred Heart Collegiate Recovery Program. That's focused primarily, of course, on substance abuse disorders. Brian has a practice in New York City as well as in Connecticut. So welcome, Brian.
Yeah, super excited to be here, and looking forward to talking with you today.
Yeah, well, thank you. So for folks listening, I think everyone listening who's a parent knows what gambling is, but I think like so many things on the show, I had a person not too long ago talking about eating disorders, talking about so many different topics. Some topics kind of become in vogue, right? And others kind of fade a little bit to the background. And so for listeners who may or may not be aware of the scope of this issue, if you could just speak to, sort of what are we looking at? What are we talking about here when we're talking about young adults and gambling?
Yeah, I mean, it's I would kind of say the best way to describe it, for those of your listeners who are familiar more on the substance use side, I would describe it as like almost the oxy phase of the opiate epidemic. So basically, I haven't placed a bet in over 9 years. I'm also in long-term recovery from substance use, but and that's kind of how I got into the space. But gambling is completely different in those 9 years that I've stopped. Meaning back in 2018, basically the Supreme Court lifted the federal ban. So it didn't instantly make sports betting legalized, but it allowed every state to decide if they want to. Currently, we're up to 39 out of 50 states have legalized.
I believe when I saw you last in Colorado, I could be crazy, but I believe you said 33. And that was
it's like 36 or 37 because
that was like a month. That was like a month ago,
know.
So that's bonkers. Okay.
Yeah. So it's state by state, it's becoming legalized. One of the traps, I mean, not to speak more about the political or the legalization, but I think the reason that it was able to get passed, because in my betting days, it was all done with kind of how we historically have associated gambling in this country, kind of like underground, mob related, right? So there was a lot of effort that went forward to place a bet, right? You needed to know somebody that knew somebody, right? There was all of that. So I think where legislation kind of got tricked was, if we just make this normalized, we will, similar to marijuana, like we will just get rid of what we call like the underground market, right? But actually it's kind of done the opposite, right? It's only more, because there's, for my college days, let's say, there was a lot of people that would stay away from gambling just simply off the fact that it was illegal. Where now, the fact that it's legal, it's a closer barrier to say, Johnny's a bookie on campus, I'm going to start betting on him instead of FanDuel, DraftKings, or the million other platforms. So gambling is, it's been a huge increase as far as
Hmm.
the amount of people that are exposed to it. You obviously, if you watch any sports, it's super incorporated in broadcasts and TV shows,
Oh,
and
the
it's really been,
sponsorships, like everything, everything. I
yeah,
mean, I'm a big soccer slash football, right? Football is in Premier League,
yeah,
and I forget which team off the top of my head, but there's a bunch of teams over the years that you would see Sky Bet or FanDuel or whatever, right, would be on the jersey. So no, it abounds, like you said. The thing that I like that you said is that there's less friction now, and that's always like something I use a lot with clients, parents, of course, is that, hey, if we want to change a behavior or habit, we have to make the new habit attractive. We have to make the old habit not attractive. We have to decrease friction if it's a healthy habit between us and, say, getting to the gym. So we have the gym bag in the
mhm,
car, and we just have to stop as opposed to going home to get changed. If we want to change, add friction between us and something, right? We want to obviously make sure that we don't have 85 social media apps or betting apps or alcohol right in the cupboard. But what you're saying, which is a real macro situation, right, that happened legislatively that now thrusts young people, is immediately, they have to now be almost individuated, because you're saying historically those external social barriers no longer exist, right? It's now frictionless. And I think it is. I mean, you speak to this more, please. You're the expert. But do you think sports betting is almost attractive and normalized and has lost a little bit of, like you said, that underbelly kind of feel to it? Do you think it's been romanticized a lot?
100%. I mean, I would say that a 10-year-old, I work specifically with males.
Hmm.
It's who this is really attacking, not saying that this doesn't impact other genders, and, but it's a 10-year-old right now who's a sports fan, I think, is being educated that gambling is part of that fandom, part of that experience, part of the whole picture,
Hmm.
where once again, like, like, go and find it. I had to realize that betting was a thing, and now I think that is completely, and you see more and more, like, there's a big platform called Kalshi that's all future markets, so they call it more like
Mm.
future trading. They just partnered with CNN where you can
Mm.
literally bet on basically the equivalent of the weather, and the
Wow.
CNN's, like, laying out the odds of the weather, so there's been almost like this glorification of gambling, and,
Mm.
yeah,
Mm.
so, yeah.
Well, thank you. I mean, for all that information, and I know you've been in the space for such a long time, and we've talked offline that, similar to what you just described, it has shifted rather dramatically, right? And speak to me about what you see on, whether it's a college campus or in a high school. Like, what are some things that are the beginnings when we think about, right, addiction?
Mhm.
Addiction often starts in a solo cup, right? A red solo cup, more
Yeah,
often than not, right? It
yeah.
can certainly start with cigarettes and cannabis and a million other things, but for a lot of people, right, it's a red solo cup. So where does this start, and what are some things that families can be mindful of to spot when it begins to crop up?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think, I I think sports in this country, like, I know you're a college athlete, I was a college athlete, like,
Hmm.
we love sports. Sports teaches us so much, how to fail, how to be a part of something that's bigger than us, how to, be a part of a team, how to deal with failure, how to deal with, integration of new people and synergy, and there's so many things that sports give us, and it's not here that I'm, like, anti-sports. I love sports,
Hmm.
um,
Hmm.
but I think that over identity. So when you
Mm.
speak about, like, specifically a college student, I worked for years, like you said at the top, at the university level. There's a lot of people that can't play college sports, right? So
Hmm.
their identity was based in athletics as a
Hmm.
high school person, and then the college level, or the college level, the pro level, they can't keep going. So, you're sitting around. So, and I think there's a social equity, is what I would call it, that comes with
Mm.
being an athlete, right? Like, we glorify it. You see parents. I remember when we got to meet out in Colorado. You telling
Hmm.
me, like, these
Hmm.
parents that are living vicariously through
Hmm.
their children's athletics, and like they feel that pressure and they want to perform. So then maybe they lose that identity. And kind of college is like, what are the messages we get about college? Best 4 years of your life.
Mhm.
Um, have fun, but
Mhm.
also like I started to learn, and a lot of my clients started to learn. There's also a similar social equity with just the knowledge of sports, but money,
Mhm.
right? Like
Mhm.
money, like having
Mhm.
money, right?
Mhm.
I can buy the girl the drinks at the bar, or I
Mhm.
can go out to dinner
Mhm.
or whatever.
Mhm.
So, um, I think from a parent's perspective, I think really, I'm a big believer in kind of like the well-roundedness, like what
Mhm.
are other identities, even if like I know some of your sons are big time soccer players,
Mhm.
like their father, and but like what else about them, what other interests do they have, and make sure we're giving that time to develop those things and understanding that like your athletic career might end, like
Mhm.
everyone's athletic career ends,
Mhm. Mhm.
and so what I'm seeing is a lot of individuals in the amount of consumption. So like back to the legalization is a lot of the companies and the industries that were pushing for legalization would look over at Europe and say, because you've been seeing this in the English Premier League forever,
Mhm.
right? Is like that's a mature market, right? It's been
Mhm.
legalized over there forever. I kind of think, just my opinion, we look at sports a little bit different in this country. Like, and I know the English Premier League, I was just over
Mhm.
there, like it's
Mhm.
huge, but it doesn't stop. It's
Right.
365. And
Right. Right.
so these young guys are just so when you compare it, especially to a substance use lens, the joke I always make is like, because I'm in recovery from both gambling and
Mhm.
drugs and alcohol,
Mhm.
it's like I never threw a bottle of vodka in the backyard with my dad. So when we're starting to
Mhm.
practice with these individuals, you talk to a drug addict or an alcoholic, they didn't start really romanticizing the relationship with drugs and alcohol to maybe like middle school, late middle school, early
Mhm.
high school,
Mhm.
where
Mhm.
like you have that really early attachment. I
Yeah.
bet if I asked you what's your earliest memory of soccer, you can be like 5 or 6. It's certainly before ever you got
Mhm.
introduced to that red
Mhm.
solo cup. So
Mhm.
it's way more
That's a
emotionally
really
valuable.
good part. Really good point that there's these, archaic family of origin, right, memories that, like with anything, with that's addiction related, we tend to struggle, right, to play the tape forward and see the whole full gamut, right, of that use or of that experience. But when you go back, you're saying there's a utopian or Pollyanna lens to which a lot of people associate sports, and then by proxy, it's a connection with their peers. It's a connection, like you said, with the sense of instant gratification and money and so on and so forth. What when you gave really good advice too about parents kind of looking. I call it the pie chart, right? Like, is this young adult a one trick pony? Are they over
Mhm.
identified with their weight? Are they over identified with their GPA and they have to have a 4.8, right? Weighted to
Mhm.
get into wherever school, right? That could be a rather unhealthy individual who's incredibly obsessive and losing sleep. That could be a more balanced individual. It depends, right? Someone could be a valedictorian of a school and be incredibly balanced. Someone could be an elite athlete and be incredibly balanced. But what you're saying, which is really great advice for parents, is to kind of think about, is my child ostensibly over identified with whatever, right? And we've all seen the kid that is over identified with weed, who has the 420 shirt on and has
Yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
weed necklace on and the weed hat on, and I had this client way back when who came in like that, and I was like, do you smoke weed? And he's like, bro, you're amazing. It's just like, yeah, I'm good, man. I'm really that good. But you can see that, right? Because there's this sense of like tribalness. And then I like with anything, right? Any addiction, like you said, there's inner lingo, right? So that universality of the sports lingo, I'm sure, bolsters someone's self-esteem to a degree. But then there's the gambling lingo, parlay and this and that and all these kinds of stuff, right? So where do you see the kind of transition from, and maybe you don't, from quote unquote whatever term you would use, safe, um, flirting with, let's say, poker with grandma, to now we're dealing with abuse and or dependency vis-a-vis gambling. What are those markers so families can, because again, it's not like we're smelling, we're not smelling betting, if you will,
No.
coming out of the room, or the bloodshot eyes, but
Mhm.
we are probably seeing mood changes and sleep dysregulation and a whole bunch of other emotional dysregulation as well, right? But talk a little bit more about, when does it get concerning?
Yeah, 100%. So I think, I get asked this question a lot. I'm very open about what I do in my recovery, and I'll play pickup basketball with some guys, and they're like, "Well, my son plays fantasy. Should I tell him not to?" And I'm like, "I'm not here to like, yeah, obviously there are many people out there that have
Sure,
healthy relationships with these
sure.
behaviors." Um, I think that what I kind of joke around with that father is like the individual that wins that fantasy football league 3 times in a row. I'm worried about him, right? So,
Mhm,
like,
mhm,
if you see as a parent, like, "Hey, mom, look at this," almost like you would, "I
mhm.
scored a hat
Right,
trick," or "I
right,
got an A
right,
on the card,"
right,
that,
right.
just the constant consumption of, like, sports media, and that's the other thing, like, once again, compared to Europe, like, you can have that constantly 24/7. Somebody's talking about the game, somebody's talking
Mhm,
about
mhm,
but yeah, there's not the physical symptoms. So I think um I think actually entering this dialogue and being proactive. But what I start to see is like the major slips, and I think this is like, I think we're getting there with the awareness around this issue, is you know, I will often get a call from a family. It's like, we've already buried, you know,
mm,
you needed 5,000, you needed 10,000.
mm,
We were starting to read online or go to some meetings and parent support stuff, some gammon on that we shouldn't have done that, but like we did it. And I think, there was a shame in it for the family initially,
mhm,
right? And they
mhm,
don't want to own that. And so I think like really, I think two things where you can be yeah, like obviously the freshman that keeps asking for more and more money
mhm,
for,
mhm,
textbooks.
mhm.
But I think it could start earlier than that,
Sure.
ideally with like, I remember us talking too, where you're like teaching your son how to budget and understand money better. Cause I think there's a lot of the families I work with and individuals I work with come from, you know, you know, I the family gets validation
Mhm,
from providing, right?
mhm,
And
mhm.
then over time, you lose a couple $100, you realize it's not that big of a deal, and there's this presenting gambling thing, and then you just keep going and going. And, kids are smart. Kids understand where they
Mhm,
sit in
mhm.
that, like I said, that social equity ladder of money and finances. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, I think, and then how much does so you talk about the beginning of it, of maybe an over identification about being an athlete, and then you lose that identity, and then an over identification of a lot of my clients. It's like they get their whole self-esteem, right,
Mhm,
if they can stop gambling. They For a long time we're turning over our self-esteem to the NFL
mhm,
or the
mhm,
NBA or some
mhm,
random game, or
mhm,
some, a blackjack
mhm,
table or a poker table.
mhm,
They then are still very wired to the self-esteem of what's in their bank account.
mhm.
I think as parents, you have to ask yourself, like, how much have I kind of lived that way or taught those
Mm,
things?
mm,
And,
mm.
kind of, yeah, we have more than them, or this, we want to live in a bigger house, or, you cost me so much money going to college. And like, how are you communicating about money
Sure,
at home?
sure.
But yeah, I think big warning signs like constant sports watching. I mean, research says like ex-athletes are like 4 or 5 times more likely, and then also 4 or 5 times more likely, like what we call like early success. Like the early big win, the early winning the
Mhm,
March Madness
mhm,
pool, the
mhm,
winning the fantasy leagues.
mhm.
That's almost like exactly where these sports books want you
Sure.
to be.
Yeah, there's so much good advice there. The thing that I just want to cue in on that you said, which I think is super smart, is this idea of, the family in the beginning is right supplying and supplicating this addiction, maybe unwittingly, maybe they have in the back of their head, like, this doesn't feel great, right? And one of the things I do a lot with families is helping them to understand, is this known to them or is this known to their loved one? And sometimes the loved one knows they're deep, deep, deep in an addiction and the family doesn't. Sometimes the family, right, has a little bit of it smells like a duck,
Yeah.
walks like a duck, talks like a duck. Maybe it's a duck. And they suppress that, they deny that. And just recently, I was working with a family where, I was completely understanding why they were not about gambling per se, but why they were kept throwing pillows sort of to brace the fall because they're trying to just right get this person to if they could just stay in the job for 3 months it might stick if they
Yeah.
could just right if they could only right get the break and what when you put yourself in that family's shoes is because of course they love that young person of course fear is driving that story because maybe their loved one has had a litany of losses or trauma or setbacks or bang ups or hang ups or whatever. But when they are able to step back, whether it is gambling and eating disorder, substances, just
Mhm.
over scaffolding, whatever, it isn't rational, right? And they are walking alongside and accompanying their loved one into sort of that toilet bowl of that progressive disease, right? And then you have, as I've talked a lot on this show about the parallel process of any disease spiral, right? So the family is getting isolated, the family is right feeling shame, the family is experiencing natural, physical, emotional, social, financial consequences along with their loved ones. So there's this merged identity that's beginning to happen without them realizing it. And now they're just living to sort of die another day and just have a micro. It's not even a micro gain. It's really just a micro stabilization, right?
Yeah.
Um, so talk a little bit about what are the resources available. Of course, you're an amazing guy, an amazing coach, and you work, correct me if I'm wrong, primarily, right, with the young adult, but you're
Mhm.
also, of course, addressing systems issues, right, and trying to help the family, right, figure out how they could be supportive and what that looks like. Where do you even begin? I mean, from a motivational coaching standpoint, to just even spark the dialogue or broach the conversation, with someone who's might not be ready, of course, to go to a program or go to GA or please correct me, the correct,
Yeah.
resource for
Yeah.
them, right?
Yeah, I mean, early on in a new individual, I'm really just trying to create like a connection, really just
Mhm.
create like
Sure.
similar interests. So I might even lean in on that like sports love or oh, you were a high school basketball player, but now you're gambling all the time. Like, let's
Mhm.
go. That's why I kind of operate more from a coaching lens than a
Mhm.
counseling lens. Like, let's go
Mhm.
play basketball. Oh, I haven't played
Mhm.
basketball in a long time.
Mhm. Mhm.
Because I will say a decent amount of my cases are an individual's first experience in therapy, treatment,
Mhm.
like,
Mhm.
so
Mhm.
I hold that very sacred,
Yeah.
like I really am just trying to get like, I'm here for you. I'm a connection. I'm someone that you can trust. I hold no judgment. That's really early on what I'm trying to do. And then I'm trying to, especially when it comes to sports bettors, which is like what we're seeing more and more of.
Mhm.
There's um I'm trying to, you know, GA and I'm a member of Gamblers Anonymous, but
Mhm.
like it's like very like steadfast, like don't watch sports for a year, which is like a lot for like
That
a
is that the that's like is that the
that's like a
message?
strong suggestion. Yeah.
That's a strong suggestion, but that's
Yeah.
like 90 and 90 in a way, right?
Yeah.
Or that's like
Correct.
right? And however not everyone's ready for that, as you know,
Yeah.
you're
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And I think it sounds like and please finish, but it sounds like you're a good not that you're against, let's say,
Mm,
that concept,
yeah.
right? But you and I are, doing this every day, and
Mhm.
it's not that we're settling for smaller gains, but
Mhm.
relationally, putting that time and energy into building that connection, whether it is, like you said, shooting hoops. It's funny, there is a basketball hoop, very close to my office in Newburyport that I've
Mhm.
basically claimed my office. It's like an
Yeah.
extension of my office because I walk there and talk. And then there's a Starbucks that's like all my females, we like basically
Mhm.
walk and get some ridiculous, stupidly
Yeah.
expensive
Yeah.
thing, and then we walk and talk. It's kind of funny.
Mhm.
And of course, there's tons of girls that shoot hoops as well and do
Mhm.
other things.
Yeah.
But I love that you're trying to build safety there and a connection. And how do you meet that person who may not be ready for GA and they are still going to be, right, potentially doing some harm? You
Hmm.
know, how do you take a harm reduction and a stages of change approach with them?
Yeah, I think I love when I get to work alongside, like, there are a lot of cases I get to work on where I'm just on the identified patient in the system, so like the
Mhm,
gambler, and then someone
mhm,
like you is working with
mhm,
the family.
mhm,
And in those cases, it's like we do a lot of things where we might like mitigate. There's great tools like self exclusion where you can go on to these websites. The problem is
mhm,
there's no national self exclusion, so you can't
mhm,
like you could
mhm,
self exclude on FanDuel or
mhm,
bet on DraftKings.
mhm,
You could,
mhm,
but so we might get clients down to like a really fixed budget of like $20
mhm,
a day and just trying to
mhm,
like
mhm,
they might gamble, they might not, like, but like let's mitigate some risk and like
mhm,
talk about what are your goals, right? Like you keep telling
mhm,
me you want a job, you want to get back to
mhm,
college, you want
mhm,
to,
mhm,
and every day you're gambling. And I think the other misconception about gambling overall is like, well, it's just, 7 o'clock at night when the
mhm,
NFL's on. It's like
mhm,
24/7 because you're like
mhm,
romanticizing it, you're
mhm,
thinking about it, you're figuring out how to get money to
mhm.
do it again. But yeah, definitely.
Well, you're describing an addiction. I mean, that
Yeah.
that obsessionality that you just described is, as you know, a marquee feature in any addiction,
Mhm.
whether that's porn, gambling,
Yeah.
food, substances, shopping, what have you, that obsessionality. And then the idea of, chasing that original high, right? Because that person's not feeling good, right? The person who drank too much and might have blacked out is waking up feeling horrible. And then on top of it, most likely they have anxiety, right? Because
Yeah.
whether they have an actual diagnosed generalized anxiety disorder or social phobia, anyone who's waking up the next day feeling horrible is going to have anxiety, right? And the
Mhm.
same is true with gambling, right? I mean, people are waking up with physiological, right, withdrawal, very different than obviously heroin or
Mhm.
opiates in terms of what that feels like. But even with cannabis, I'm always educating families or less families, more young adults. They're like, it's not addictive. And I'm like, what do you look like if you just stopped
Mhm.
today? Oh my God, I'd be so anxious. I'd be irritable. I'd be this,
Mhm.
I'd be that. So, so the same vicious cycle is ensuing, right? There. And the
Mhm.
fact that you said you're able to, you know, begin to spark some sense of internal limits and then also pull them back, right? So they're reducing harm, but with the $20 bet versus the 2000 or $400 one. Um, and now you're also trying to get them to put on a wider lens and figure out really who are they and how do
Yeah.
you pull, you begin to kind of massage them out of this crux, this over
Mhm.
identification. What do you
Yeah.
see? Yeah, please go. And
Years ago, I probably specifically working with gamblers for about 5 years, it was a lot of, you know, Wall Street types like making a lot of money and just like
mhm,
kind of getting obsessed with that quick transaction, right? There's
mm,
nothing more transactional than a bet, right?
mhm,
Like you
mhm,
win or you lost, right?
mhm,
You the blackjack hit or it didn't, and so kind of that obsession. In the last couple years, I've seen it like really hijack like the young adults so much more. Where like what you were just saying about like that person that stopped smoking weed, it's I'm anxious, I'm avoidant, I have some social stuff, I have,
mhm,
like my real
mhm,
problem, right? Weed being the solution.
mhm,
Same thing with gambling, but like I am unsure about my ability to function and create a
mhm,
life, right?
mhm,
So I
mhm.
get a lot of like graduated college, but really doesn't have a plan, right? Or
Right,
dropped out
right.
of college and now feels like a failure, or worked for a couple years but got laid off and then found this. And it's like underneath exactly what you're saying is like I am unsure about myself, and gambling creates this. It's like, oh, I love sports and
Mhm.
this is something. And that's once again the difference, right? You talk to an alcoholic, it's not like this bottle of vodka is going to change my life, right?
Right.
Like you might be like, this is going to limit my my
Shakes,
thinking.
my shakes or
Yeah,
my whatever.
whatever.
Yeah,
Yeah,
of course.
but it's not like, and that's the difference between the gambler is like every day is the most important day of their life in active addiction, right? Today's the
Mhm.
day that the ball is just going to bounce the right way.
Right,
And
right.
so it's like,
So
it's,
they're
you know,
they're they're
yeah.
they're they're romanticizing the original high in a way and living
Mhm.
vicariously through that dopamine hit. And why that's so attractive is that it is glossing over, right, the vacancy of their own competency.
Yes.
If you so what I hear, which is really important for parents, which we talk all the time about, what could we do, right? If the last, like, I think 8 episodes have pretty much been mostly about helping families to set their kiddos up for success, so we're not in a failing to live or failing to thrive or failing to leave parents or failing to launch, whatever word we want to use, phenomenon. But what when we hear this, or at least when I hear this, I think, wow, this young adult, I have a lot of empathy. They're really graduating with really low self-worth and self-esteem.
Mhm.
They're having a shit ton of imposter syndrome and probably a lot of FOMO. And if I can just, yes, up the bank account, and you talked earlier, which I loved, about kind of our financial death sentences, I call them, meaning the messages we communicate about
Mhm.
money to our
Mhm.
children. Now that's really tethered for them that they are a piece of crap, right? Because they have
Mhm.
nothing in the bank. And then to boot, they don't have a master's degree or maybe a hard skill, or maybe they do have a hard skill and a master's degree, but they just don't know where to start, whether on the executive functioning side, the shame, self-esteem side.
Mhm.
And wow, what an attractive, and I'm saying this somewhat sarcastically, but I get it, right? I mean, talk about the old adage of, while I'm in the meeting, right, my disease is doing push-ups in the parking
Mhm.
lot. This is a pretty attractive disease, let's be
Yes.
real. And,
Yes.
and I think it's highly unattractive, right? Because we all know where it goes and where it ends. But I think for a hot minute, someone could probably fake it till they make it way better than you could, right? With heroin, opiates, and even alcohol, right? And even
100%.
cannabis, right?
You
Yeah.
know, we talked about like the accessibility, and I love like the word like frictionless. Like, as
Hmm.
you know, everyone talks about the accessibility, and it's like it's legal now, and that's the problem. There's so many more elements to just that. It's also, for example, like in my not, so proud, but it is what it is. Like, my active addiction days, right? Like borrowing money from the wrong type of people, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Now, like you have, like if you do have a job, right? These like cash advance companies, they'll pay you your paycheck a week before interest, like the ability to
Totally.
go get a personal installment loan online. It's like I have like the same companies I see, we're breaking down like the financial structure, and it's like these companies that will just give anybody money at these insane rates. So like it's not just um the accessibility, right? It's like the new age of like
Hmm.
these traps, and it starts really early on. There's a whole other side of like, you know, these games on your phone, right? That are like
Hmm.
you playing a Candy Crush, and then
Hmm.
at some point, Candy Crush says, you can either give me $5 a day and I'll stop running these ads and you can just keep playing Candy Crush. Or, like that in a way, it's kind of like just making a
hundred
slot
percent.
machine
A
and
hundred
just
percent.
like keep
Yeah.
putting the money in and keep getting to play, right? And it's
There
like,
is a Wally, and there is a Wally quality here,
mhm,
which if any parent out there listening has not seen Wally, please do. It is like a social documentary about where we are today, and it was so ahead of its time. No, I get that. I get that. And then the idea of the mind-numbing quality and the addictive quality and the isolation that exists,
mhm,
right, in any disease. But when your phone is, one of the biggest things right now that every parent is fighting, right, is,
mhm,
and they're struggling themselves, I'm sure, as we all are, with modeling and regulating our relationship with our phones. And then to boot, we have, our kids, right, with Snapchat and this and that and everything, and like you said, all these games and V-Bucks and Roblox and this
mhm,
and that. And yes, I mean, there's a lot of programming around incentives and
mhm,
not necessarily understanding. Even Starbucks is a perfect example. I was working with someone recently, and she is not an impulsive shopper. She doesn't have any shopping. She just literally straight up had no clue. And I was doing a budget with her, like
mhm.
showing her how much a freaking
Yeah,
750, like a frappuccino or whatever the hell
yeah,
costs,
yeah.
and it's insane. Like, it's just insane. So, and I think what's also challenging too, and you could speak to this further, but it doesn't feel real. I think, for a
Mhm.
lot of people, because you're not seeing your bank account go up or down instantly, right?
Mhm.
Whereas at a casino, not to say I'm
Yeah.
advocating
Yeah.
for go to casinos, people.
Yeah.
That's the
Yeah.
message from this pod. No,
Yeah.
but correct me if I'm wrong. Back in the old days, it was cash, right?
Yeah.
And while, of course, any addict will still find a way to get more cash, and you've shared some examples there of over leveraging, loans and putting yourself in debt. But do you think that also further expedites the progressive nature of this disease too? Is that
Oh,
you're not seeing, in
100%.
essence? Yeah.
100%. And I think that's unfortunately, I think, gambling or not, right? Like not feeling that, like growing up in this age, like you might not ever touch cash, right? You might never, if
Hmm.
you're 15 years old, you might have never really, maybe five
Sure.
bucks here or there.
Sure.
Um, but yeah, I think it's a huge part of it. And it really becomes just a number. And it's kind of similar to like, it's kind of like a financial term, like the high watermark. So, for example, let's say Johnny is gambling and he goes up to
Why is it
10,000.
always Johnny, Brian?
Yeah, I know, I know.
What do you have against
Yeah,
Johnny?
I know.
Poor Johnny. All the
Yeah,
Johnnies out
I
there,
know, Johnny.
we issue a public service announcement.
Yeah, $10,000, right? He gets it
Yep.
up to 10,000. Now, 3 days ago, his outlook on life might have been $10,000 would absolutely change 90% of my problems, if not all of them.
Sure. Sure.
Then you lose a bet for $2,000, right? And you're at plus $8,000. And it's like, oh, well, I'm nothing. I'm zero. Like, cause I've been to 10, I've tasted 10. So
Hmm.
that's like where,
Hmm.
similar to
Hmm.
like financial, like high watermark, you have a
Totally.
portfolio and it's like, I've touched here. So now I'm here and I just got to over leverage and that just becomes obsessive. And like, once again, I think like this is, you're always gonna and this is the other thing in the comparison of substance use, right? Like, that's why I actually think, I got to take a eating disorder class in my master's program,
Hmm.
and I remember just being like, "This is actually a little bit more," because I'm an alcoholic and a drug addict, and I don't need to have a relationship with those things, period,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
Like, my wife can
Hmm.
have some wine, but I'm just like, I
Hmm.
don't need to,
Hmm.
like, whatever.
Hmm.
You're gonna have a relationship with money, just like you're gonna have a
Yeah.
relationship with food, you know?
Right.
So, like,
Right.
that is different, and I think once again, similar to that, like, early childhood connection or some of my best memories or that little league team or
Hmm.
that
Hmm.
travel team I played on and, like, um, similarly, like, those early messages about money, once again, like, how much can you detach from that? And it's like, I mean, in America specifically, like, very hard to detach from that, you know? So,
Yeah.
makes things really hard. So we're trying to limit access to money, is like one of the first things I'm trying to be like, okay, like I get it. You still might be pre-contemplative, contemplative, but like, let's just like lower this. And then I mean, I've had cases where just like keeping up with the debt and like
Hmm.
payments to 12 different people, and that just becomes a whole life in itself.
Hmm.
And then managing. So you're trying to limit money, access to money,
Sure.
you know, trying to recreate, like trying to ideally separate fully from the world of sports as far as the consumption side. But
Hmm.
then I'm trying to tap into, you know, let's go back to that like early childhood
Hmm.
relationship with it,
Hmm.
and
You're doing such deep
yeah,
work, dude.
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
you are, oh, like, attacking it from so many sides. You're helping this person obviously delay gratification between them and this abusive pattern. You're also trying to help them, right, build this new identity, right? That's actually way more holistic and less, one trick pony.
Mhm,
You're certainly helping them to stop hurting themselves. So there's a harm reduction quality. There's a motivational coaching quality around, again, who am I and what is my purpose? What is my why? We know young adults, particularly men, right, are really struggling right now with this sense of identity. That's why we're seeing so much of the failing to launch for females as well too. Of course, there's tons of young men though who are lacking purpose, identity, focus, and also we don't know as young men yet, even older men, how to even build friendships. We don't know how to even build sort of a tribe. I was talking to someone the other day and I was saying that, when was the last time you sat down and even just spent 20 minutes jotting down your values as a dad or your ideals as a dad or your mission as a dad? Whereas he has spent, I mean, every day he spends 20 minutes on his career, which is not inherently
Yeah.
bad, because that's what we do. We develop KPIs, we develop SMART goals. We're always thinking about the horizon line, right, for our careers and thinking about the next thing. But we don't do that as parents. Women do a better job than men because
Yeah.
they're going to journal. Maybe they might, do a better job with podcasts. Men are coming. They're coming along. They've come a long way. So I want to give props to
Yeah.
shout out to men and women, of course. And I love all the parents who are brave enough to work with me and be a part of this program, because we have to take a look at, vis-a-vis this issue or any issue, right? What have we been modeling? What have we been unconsciously or consciously communicating? What have we been normalizing or romanticizing? And what is our role? And again, so many of the parents I work with, like you mentioned, the 12 people that, 12 different loans, or even getting
Yeah.
money from shady people. That's scary. And for a
Yeah.
lot of my families, that when I do discovery calls, they're like, yeah, if I do this or that, they could die. And that's sometimes true.
Mhm.
That, the issue, right? If you're dealing with drug addiction, that's unfortunately a scary reality that families have to consider. Same thing if you owe, Jimmy
Oh, yeah.
Knuckles, whatever money, right? So these are real things. That being said, right, we have to look at on the front end, which is why I hear so much good like prevention talk in what you do too, not just about
Yeah.
the bigger, let's say, consequence, but even just in the moment, but also even just early intervention is the big message I'm taking from this, that we can really help stretch our kids' emotional bandwidth, their sort of identity bandwidths, and we can make sure that, again, they're not marooned on an island. They're not over identifying with sports or with money or with,
Mhm. Mhm.
this instant gratification. So there's a lot there. And I think helping families take a deep breath and slow the fudge down, and also not let fear write their story, probably is a really good way to get them from overjoining in this process. And before they know it, they've loaned out,
Yeah.
thousands and thousands of dollars, which has only made their young adult not have to feel the pain of their addiction.
Yeah, and it is like it's kind of the silent killer, the silent addiction. Those are the terms you hear a lot around the gambling, but like, we don't consider like, and I obviously don't, and I don't think anyone really does, but like overdose is suicide, right? It's just like it's an overdose. And like, so if you don't look at it that way, which basically everyone does, and I agree with,
Mhm.
yeah, compulsive gamblers have the highest rate of suicide out of any major addiction.
Wow.
So like,
Wow.
it's a big, it's a very
Well, that
common.
pressure just
Yeah.
must be oof.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And because you're talking about like, I mean, I can kind of like I qualify in both sides, but like the gambling is yeah, you're talking about a lot of destruction not only for yourself and others. And like, so you think about like early sobriety, right? Just from like let's say alcohol. It's like 30, 60, 90 days, like you're feeling better, you're back in the gym. But when you're staring, let's say $100,000 worth of debt and you're making
Mhm.
$20 an hour, right? Like I
Mhm.
have a lot of
Mhm.
these, like these guys have touched 18, 19, 20-year-olds have touched
Sure.
$100,000
Sure.
time in an account, and their education level, their experience level is worth $20 an hour. Like, how can you get them to slow down and say, like, it's gonna be a long time until you have $100,000 if you do
Mhm.
this,
Mhm.
And but yeah, how much do we glorify money in the home, or how much do we, is that what's talked about, or that's the expectation? Um, and I think that's a lot of it. And then I think,
Mhm.
um, but yeah, like I do think there's a lot of things that can be done proactively, and
Mhm.
and the f- it is so predatory, the marketing. I'll give you like I like
Mm.
telling this story because like, you know, it's and I think there's some really good people that are really knocking on legislators' doors about this,
Mhm.
which is great
Mhm.
to see. This is the way I put it. So 18 to 22, let's say that's the rough, 18 to 23, rough
Mhm.
college kid, right?
Mhm.
And, let's say FanDuel or DraftKings or one of these companies gives you a free $500 to play, right? If you
Is
put,
is that is that typical right now?
yeah, there's a lot of like bonus betting and like
Okay.
promos and like,
So, hey, it's not my money,
yeah, yeah,
right? It's just is that it's like a drug addict giving you a free, I mean,
correct.
not a drug, it's like a drug deal, right,
Yeah.
where you're getting a free, which I
Oh,
don't think that exists. I
no,
don't
I
think that.
never got free plays, free money back,
Yeah, yeah,
some free
yeah,
play. Yeah, it's
yeah.
so this is just kind of what I believe. And because once again, like similar, like obviously, like
Mhm,
the prefrontal cortex isn't fully developed, so the risk taking
mhm,
behavior is higher, right? So like
mhm,
part of it's development, obviously.
mhm,
And but that 18 to 23-year-old, he gets a free $500, right?
mhm.
Let's say he runs it all the way up to $5,000. He cashes that money out, which is, like, very hard to do, right? Like, it's like you just wanna keep going.
Yep,
That's when the
yep.
addiction takes over, right? And it's like, "Well, 5 was great, but I want a 10, I want 20." But
Mhm,
let's say he does do that, right? I would basically say that no college-aged male could then never go back, right? Like, wasn't that fun when I got the
right.
money and I, like,
Sure,
even if they're able to get out, which would that in
sure.
of itself would be amazing. But, like, that's, like, the hook that these companies are doing, and then it's like, let's say we're in college dorm together, it's like, if I bring you on the site, I get an
Mhm,
extra $100, I get an
mhm,
extra it's like, oh,
mhm,
if the heroin dealer gives my other friend
mhm,
like, these guys don't
mhm,
operate that way, so it's
mhm,
what they're kinda getting away with is it's just a general lack of understanding of how, um because like I said, it's different, like, money is something that's never
mhm,
going away.
mhm,
Sports is
mhm,
gonna be a
mhm,
fabric of this, and,
mhm.
this country.
So insidious, man.
Yeah.
So insidious. And you just you hear how slippery that slope is, and like you're saying, that person, even if they can do that, that's like the Dalai Lama, or the Michael Jordan
Yeah.
of say that situation. I used to travel around the country and do a lot of parenting workshops, and I used to show a pie chart, of course, anonymously, of a former client of mine. This is a true client. He was a valedictorian of his high school, and he used to smoke weed twice a month, every other Friday, pretty
Mhm.
much, um, twice a month. And I used to show his pie chart as parenting presentations, because he had an academic slice, which was huge. He was a
Yeah.
valedictorian. He was on the, I think, like, debate team, which
Mhm.
was big. He was on the rowing team. He
Mhm.
had a girlfriend. He had a job. He
Mhm.
had a family slice. And then if you zoomed in, you had to like zoom
Yeah.
in,
Yeah.
you could see the thinnest little thing that was a cannabis slice. And I used to say, that is like the 0.00000, like 1%. Like, that is not what, most teens are doing. So what I hear from a message to parents that you just stated is that while we can't be omnipresent and we can't helicopter and we can't shut down every little thing, that idea of the "I'm just experimenting" line with gambling is similarly flawed as it is with cannabis or alcohol, or obviously benzodiazepines, or the
Mhm.
list goes on and on, opiates. So, and it sounds very, just like the psychology of that. These people have hired fantastic psychologists who are, of course, building all these little incentives and gamifying, right, the hook, and that's
Yes.
very difficult. So I've learned so much. A couple of things I just want to summarize for parents listening is, definitely think of your own kid's pie chart. Make sure that they're, heterogeneous as opposed to
Mhm.
homogeneous in
Mhm.
terms of their passions, interests, things of that nature. Definitely be mindful if they're clearly struggling on the self-esteem, self-worth side, and all they talk about, right, is this one thing, whether it is
Mhm.
this sport or sports in general. Definitely be mindful of how much allure or esteem, or just how much we're putting money on a pedestal. And obviously, let's be mindful of any early signs and be mindful of the things we can control. So we can control whether we are right? Giving our kids money and or helping them to slip deeper into negative patterns and avoid some natural consequences early on that could be rather helpful. And of course, when someone is concerned about their loved one, you are an absolutely amazing, amazing resource. I'm so excited to have you as a part of my network.
Yeah.
And if anyone has questions or concerns about whether or not their teen or young adult is, slipping, whether that's like you mentioned earlier, Brian had mentioned pre-contemplative or contemplative. Those are different stages from the stages of change model. If you feel like there's any red flags, please reach out to Brian. And the best way to do that, Brian, is
Yeah, my website, briandolancounseling.com, email, call, my numbers on there. But even if it's just connecting someone to a meeting or a resource locally, like happy to do it, and very passionate about it, and super, super grateful I got to chat it up with you today.
Yeah, and Brian is just a great person, and I love your approach of the coming alongside, and obviously, of course, your ultimate game or goal is to help this person achieve recovery and full time sobriety from gambling. But I love that you meet them where they're at, and you understand exactly how much to push, how much to pull, what to let go, what to allow kind of to fail forward, so to speak. And you do a great job of understanding, again, the young person's perspective, and doing it in such a non-judgmental way where you hold space, but you also challenge the heck out of them to grow, which is why I love using you. So
Yeah.
thank you so much. Thank you so much. I learned so much. And of course, any parent who's listening who is concerned about their teen or young adult who can be struggling with gambling or eating disorders like we talked about today, or of course, mental health and addiction, or is just displaying any kind of emotionally dysregulated behaviors and really struggling to lead a life that they could be proud of and you could be proud of, please go to fourpeaksparents.com. Reach out to me. You can sign up for a free discovery call. Also, please sign up for the newsletter so you can get free tips, tools, and strategies right to your inbox. And I hope, I guess it's going to come out after the holidays. So anyway, I hope everyone had a happy holiday.
Yeah.
In the
Absolutely.
past. So thank you so much, Brian. And thank you to all the listeners. Have a great day, everybody. Bye.
Thanks again.